Good. So how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thank you. Just working hard, hardly working. You know the deal. So, I've had some questions come up this week and I wanted to run them past you because it's heartbreaking to see really hardworking salespeople really struggling. And, I've known several of these in my lifetime, people who were very hardworking, very motivated, and yet they kept stumbling and being unable to meet their quotas and their goals. Why do you think that is?
Right. Well, some of the things we talk about, like are you busy or are you productive? And I can tell you yesterday I spent the day prospecting and I didn't feel productive. I was busy, but when I look back on the activities that I did yesterday, I was productive. But I know sometimes we can feel very busy but not productive. And I think when I have those days, I have to go back and I have to look at my system and say, I checked that box. I prospected to 30 people. And what am I going to do now? And what am I going to do tomorrow? Right. So I think, sales is tough.
Mhm.
And there are times that wear you down. And I guess my activities yesterday are still fresh in my head. But but I think on a broader level, your question is valid. There are so many good salespeople that are busy and feel like they're spinning their wheels. At Sandler, we talk about having a system. A system helps us define, I'm done with this and what's next. And I think it also helps us understand, what are the activities that I need to do before I'm making some calls? What are those activities after making some calls? And what are those things that I'm going to do when I'm in conversation with a potential buyer? So I know you guys have all heard of, the buyer seller dance. But the gist of it is when we have a system in place, we're leading those activities, we're leading that conversation. And we know what to do at every stage of that buyer's journey. So instead of just reacting to the buyer, we know what we're doing in the qualifying stages, in the uncovering pain stages, discussing investments, not just in money, but in time and resources.
I think to that point, some of the people that I'm thinking about probably fall down in the systems. They're highly entertaining and generous and wonderful people. And I think they're relying on their ability to connect and their friendliness and
Right.
their trustworthiness to close deals when actually they don't have any real system.
Right. And some people are like that. They're outgoing, they've been in the industry a long time, they're highly networked. But if performance is based on your top rep, that's not a system, that's just risky.
Well, what happens if something happens to your top rep?
Well,
That's a scary
right.
idea.
That is a scary idea.
You're right
Um,
though. You do tend to see teams of people and you've got the one that's up here and then you maybe have one here and then you have bam 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 and that's not going to drive consistent revenue because you really only have the two. And what
right.
could you do to improve this one and how could you improve the systems of the others?
Right. And I think that's the value. That's really the value of a sales system, right? Is you get predictable results from
Right.
all of your reps and you know what to do at each stage of the selling cycle. I think a system makes success repeatable across the team.
Hmm.
It's coachable, it's scalable, and coaching, that's
Mm.
really I think there's a lot of misnomers out there that, coaching or sales leaders get in there and they talk about the results. And we can all look at dashboards and metrics, but that's not coaching.
Right.
That's just reading results. And results are important. But if we don't know what caused those results and we're not asking the right questions from those sales team members, even those that aren't superstars, then we're not going to get down to really the issues that are at play. And I think if you have a system in place and you can quickly identify, did you miss this step? Did you miss this step?
And I think that you hit on a good point because sometimes those team members on the bottom could be coached into much higher performance levels if their team leader or their sales leader was trained in the proper selling systems.
Right, right. I always want my sales leaders to be involved when I'm working with teams on sales performance and consistency. I always want the sales leaders involved. I need them to know what that system looks like. What are the steps that their team is going through every day, every week, every month? And I also like to work with the sales leaders on these are effective questions in your touch base calls that can really unearth what are the underlying gaps. And sometimes it's not always a lack of effort. Sometimes it's just a lack of discipline. I won't say sometimes, I'll say often it's a lack of discipline.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that, so often sales leaders aren't trained in coaching. They were maybe promoted into that position because they were great at sales, but they don't know how to coach. So really, like you talked about, they're just looking at the dashboard and the metrics and then hoping that it's all going to work out.
Right. And not really coaching the activities within the whatever system they have in place.
Right, right. And hope is not a revenue strategy.
I love that line. Hope
Uh,
is not a revenue strategy.
well,
No,
not
somebody,
not not a good one, that's for sure.
no.
So when you look at developing a team and their leader and you go into a training method, what are like the top three things if you could just like hit bullet points on how you would train a team that's struggling?
Right, right. I'm assuming I'm walking in and they know what their ideal client profile looks like. I'm assuming they have some tech in place that is feeding them data that allows them to quickly follow up or make phone calls, set meetings. Is really looking at, what is their existing process for qualifying opportunities, for uncovering pain, and discussing investment. And I would say
Mm.
those are the top, skills that I like to work with teams on.
And what does that training look like?
I like to work with teams for a good 10, 12 weeks. That's once a week for an hour and a half. And that's walking through the system, why it's important, right? And we need to understand a system before we can agree to it. We need to understand and agree before we put it into practice. Once
Mhm.
we get it into practice, we need accountability and discipline. So moving them through that system to understand, agree, and practice, and then touching base with the sales leaders to see what kind of results are they seeing? What's the return on investment on this, right? So sales leaders, I typically work with them, I touch base with them once a month. But I do like them to go through that first 10, 12 week program with me and
Mhm.
their teams so then they know what they're learning and they know why these coaching questions are important.
Right.
From there, we move into, kind of drill down activities, right? So that's a contract is a year, but it starts out with foundations across 10, 12 weeks.
Okay. That seems like a very low time investment to if you could pull three of your team to where your top salespeople are, it seems like that would be very, very advantageous. I mean, what would that look like for a sales leader in terms of their pocketbook, even?
Right, right. Increase the revenue in the company on net new sales.
Yeah,
Yes,
big
it's,
deal.
yeah.
Big deal.